Welcome to the Healthcare IT Today CIO podcast. I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today, and I'm excited to bring you the most practical healthcare CIO insights and perspectives. We know your job is challenging. We want to help you be more successful. And our guest today is Tim Calahan. He's Chief Technology Officer at Michigan Medicine. Welcome, Tim.
Welcome, John. Thanks so much for having me on today's podcast.
Yeah, excited to have you on the show and looking forward to hearing you have an ambitious project moving Epic to the cloud. But before we go there, tell us a little bit about yourself and Michigan Medicine.
So I'm the CTO at Michigan Medicine, and Michigan Medicine is the entity attached to the University of Michigan. So we are comprised of the healthcare systems and clinics attached to the University of Michigan, as well as the medical school. So it's really all of those entities. We also have some affiliates that we're bringing into the Michigan Medicine system as well. So it's a fairly large healthcare system in and of itself. And we also, want to make sure that we're addressing the research needs of the academic side of the business.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to have the mix of the academic and the health system side of things. You're as I mentioned, you're working on an ambitious project, moving Epic to the cloud. Why do you think migrating Epic to the cloud should be a key priority for hospitals?
Yeah, no doubt. And it's a good question. I get this question all the time. So I'm relatively new to the role at Michigan Medicine. I'm a little over 2 years old, which is still fairly new. And part of the reason why I took the position is the executives at Michigan Medicine really wanted to update their IT infrastructure, and they really had a vision for how public cloud would really be used as part of that upgrade and that modernization effort. And I've been doing that over the last 10 years. So when I took the position, naturally we started to look at key clinical applications like Epic and like Sectra, as well as other clinical applications. But a lot of organizations tend to gravitate toward what I call the 800-pound gorilla applications in the room. So you really look at Epic, which is so important for most healthcare entities, as well as the imaging application. And we were really no different. We started really focusing on Epic. We also started to focus on the imaging application. But what's great about focusing on Epic and trying to understand how I move that to the public cloud is really around all the time, effort, and energy that's been done for that particular application. So just for a little bit of background, the public clouds, probably for the last 6 or 7 years, as well as Epic themselves, have been jointly working on engineering efforts to try to understand and help their customers make that migration and really have a very prescriptive method in terms of how you would go about doing that for a healthcare system. So they have kind of tips and tools and technologies that you would use in order to move your Epic environment from an on-prem or from an on-prem data center environment out into the public cloud. So there's things like cloud specification guides and things that really aid in that journey.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to think about 5, 10 years ago, we would have never thought about putting it on the public cloud. I think it's largely because Epic in this case hadn't embraced it. And so they hadn't really made their application available on the cloud. But it's amazing how 5 years later, 10 years later, there's just a sea change that I see happening in this. What do you think are some of the keys to the seamless transition to the cloud from on-prem when it comes to Epic hosting? You talk about using some of these guides, that makes sense. Are there some other keys as you transition to make sure that it happens seamlessly? I mean, especially for the users. I think healthcare is unique. 24/7, no downtime. You can't just tell them take the day off, right? Like,
Right.
so, they need access to Epic. How do you make sure there's a seamless transition for your users?
Yeah, I think, as you look at migrating Epic from an on-prem environment out into the public cloud, one of the unique or distinct differences that stands out almost immediately is the platform change. The way that you administer on-prem assets like servers and storage in an on-prem legacy traditional data center is very different than how you manage compute and storage in the public cloud, and all of the other tools and technologies that are available in the public cloud. So it's really important to address that fact that there's a sea change and there's a technology modernization, or there's a technology improvement when you make that change. And one of the first things that we started to look at is how do we address that skilling change, and make sure that we've got the proper training programs in place, that we make sure that our on-prem staff, our traditional staff, is very well versed in cloud and cloud technology and how to administer Epic in the cloud. So I think that's fundamental to the change in the move. And then the second thing that we need to do, and we need to make sure that any organization who goes down this road is it's important to do a lot of proper planning as well as doing a lot of proper training. So when we move things out into the public cloud, it's important to have a very good testing regimen so that you can, when you make that move, when you test to make sure that third-party devices will work, or that credit card readers will work, or that any of the third-party apps work, that's well tested and well understood before you actually make that change. So that regimen and that structure and that maturity is really important as you begin to make that migration and make that move. So you can do it in bits and pieces. You can do it as a big bang. We've done it in a variety of different ways. I can't say one's better than the other. So there's lots of different approaches, but preparation is probably super, super important, as well as the testing regimen that you implement and make sure that you put in place.
Yeah, it's interesting. We saw that same thing with the HR implementation. I don't think there's a necessarily a right way, big bang versus incremental versus, like we've
Right.
seen it all. They all have their pros and cons. I think the shift to the cloud with Epic and something as large as Epic, I don't know if there's a right answer either. There's pros and cons to each, so that's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned the reskilling. I'd love to hear, what should a CIO be doing to prep an organization internally before you move to the cloud? Reskilling is interesting. I'd love to hear more about what you did there. I mean, did you have to get rid of people? I mean, no one wants to hear that, but it's an important conversation, right?
Yeah, so I've been moving Epic to the cloud for the last 10 years. And one of the customers that I had, um, uh, who's currently a CTO, James Klutz, one of the things that he did really, really well is he just made sure that all of his staff knew that no one was going to lose their job. That there was going to be a reskilling or retooling, or people were going to focus on different things that were more important to the organization than the things that they were doing today. So I've taken a very similar approach in every migration after that, and just creating a calming effect to the staff that's on prem, or the existing staff, just to let everyone know, hey, there's going to be plenty of work to do once we move things to the cloud. And I guarantee you it'll be more fun and more interesting than what you're doing today. But there is a journey that you have to take people along in order to do that. So one of the first things that we did at Michigan Medicine is we kind of did a baseline, and we wanted to see where everyone's public skills were at. If we were going to assess everyone, where would we fall in that particular spectrum? And we did not score super well, and we kind of understood that we wouldn't. But we wanted to be able to create that baseline so that we could begin to put training plans in place, so that we could say, okay, you're a storage engineer, you want to do storage in the cloud. Here are all the different training classes and modules you should take in order to prepare for that eventual move and that migration. And the other thing is, at Michigan Medicine, there's pros and cons to moving fast or moving slowly. And because we're a public institution, we have to do a lot of RFPs. It just takes us a little slower to move in particular directions that we would like to move in, our IT modernization being one of them. But the benefit of that is it has allowed our staff to know which direction we're going to move in, and we've had training programs in place. AWS was able to provide free training. Azure was able to provide free training. So we were able to provide years of free training for our people to really get acclimated to this new world that they were going to move into. And we also partnered with, kind of a training partner to continually assess our staff and continually point our staff in training directions and providing training curriculum. And we've embedded that into our HR process, so that we know that continuous learning is an expectation of the job. We're in IT, things are going to change all the time. And we need to make sure that we have a program in place that'll continuously challenge us, not only for this cloud migration, but also for future technology initiatives that may take shape.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine the staff are pretty open to this idea. You know, if I were doing infrastructure, I'd want to have cloud training on my list of skills, right? It's unless you're a couple of years out from retirement, maybe there's might be a few exceptions. That's interesting. How did you approach kind of the various cloud options that are out there? I mean, Epic can be hosted in a wide variety of places, AWS, Azure. Epic has their own cloud hosting. There's third parties. I know Rackspace is a popular Epic hoster. How did you approach kind of these various cloud options, and which one did you want to use?
Yeah, so there are options out there, which is wonderful, because although there are different public cloud providers, they do have unique strengths and benefits. So it is important to take a look at the public clouds to see what is the best fit for the organization. And if you look at AWS, if you look at Microsoft, if you look at GCP, they all have those different strengths and weaknesses. So what we tried to do from a Michigan Medicine perspective is we try to be very prescriptive in terms of what our business needs and drivers might be. And then, as I said, we had to issue an RFP to really begin to flush out who best met those business requirements. As an academic medical center, we have some unique licensing characteristics that were provided to us. And that factored into our decision making as well. So there's a monetary component to this evaluation. There's a features and functionality component to the evaluation. There's a maturity component to the evaluation. Obviously, Epic and the ability to host that is important. But we want to host our imaging, and we want to host all of our third-party ancillary supporting applications. So we have 900 applications that have different business requirements that need to be fully vetted and flushed out. So in our process, we came to the conclusion that Microsoft Azure would be our preferred public cloud platform, but other institutions might come to different conclusions.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors there. I mean, you bring up some interesting points. One that I'd love to hear more about is kind of this decision. It sounds like it was a Michigan Medicine decision to kind of really embrace the public cloud rather than, some of the Epic or third party, cloud options, right? But it sounds like you're all in on the public cloud. Why that decision versus maybe a third party hosting or Epic hosting, which is still in the cloud, but maybe not the public cloud?
Yeah, no, it's I'm happy, and that's a great call out. So obviously, I spent some time moving Epic to a private cloud environment. That's kind of a VMware based environment, and that's what the Rackspace will provide today. That's what Epic Hosting provides today. And obviously, we were moving or considering and highly thought of moving Epic to the public cloud. And the reason why we wanted to do that is when you look at kind of the legacy infrastructure that we were trying to move away with, whether it be on-prem, VMware based, or whether it be a private cloud, VMware based, we were trying to really take it to the next level with public cloud being native hypervisors, as well as all of the tools and technologies that come with the public cloud. So it's not just hosting Epic for Epic's sake. It's hosting Epic to provide it additional tools and technologies that you can then begin to plug into it. So when we look at Epic, we also talked about we're going to move, our medical imaging sector to the cloud, and we're going to turn on things like Nuance, and we're going to turn on PowerScribe One, which are other cloud-based components. So when you start to turn on all of these different applications that are hosted in the public cloud, we also need an ability to collect that data that those different applications will create. And the public cloud gives us the best, really, tools and capabilities as it relates to data lakes and data fabric and data bricks and things of this nature in order to collect that data and represent that data back to our end user community. And that's why we really think of public cloud as this paradigm shift of moving away from the legacy infrastructure environment that we've had over the last 10 or 20 years, which has served us well. But certainly we want to take it to that next level to be able to plug in different tools and technologies that can really take the business to the next level.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on my other question on this topic is really around, does this pigeonhole you into Azure, right? Like, you kind of mentioned it with your, the imaging, right? And the other software, the Nuance solution, right? So, is it kind of like, once you choose Epic, guess what? Every other software needs to integrate with Epic, in a lot of cases, right? Do you feel that kind of same pressure when you were making that selection that, hey, we're on Azure, so that means, we're going to have, is it just a bias to Azure, but maybe, hey, if there's compelling reasons for the other, then we'll use one of the others as well? Or how do you kind of see that playing out?
Yeah, no, another good question. So, as we're beginning to unfold in our cloud journey, one of the first things we started to stand up is we're standing up multiple landing zones. We had to do a lot of remodeling to the Azure landing zone that already existed, but we're implementing a landing zone in AWS and we're implementing a landing zone in GCP. And part of the reason for that is the University of Michigan is a large place. Michigan Medicine is a very large healthcare provider. So we fully acknowledge that there will be business needs and desires that will cause workloads to be hosted in AWS as well as GCP. And we will have to interoperate and interact with those different workloads. So one of the first RFPs we actually sent out was around our WAN topology to make sure that we could have a very robust WAN infrastructure out to the native cloud on ramps, and that we could connect to different clouds like Azure or AWS or GCP in a very seamless and programmatic way, in a software defined way. So it doesn't take us 3 months to connect AWS. We can connect AWS within a few hours. And those are the types of technologies we wanted to put in place. And even though we're putting a lot of eggs into the Microsoft basket, if business terms and conditions might change down the road, we would very easily be able to pivot and move things in a different direction. I mentioned that we've got about 900 applications that will be moving to the public cloud. So in the next 2 or 3 years, Michigan Medicine, and I just said this earlier to my staff, we're going to be really, really good at moving applications over the next 2 or 3 years because we're going to have to move 900 of them from our on-premise environment out into the public cloud. So if we need to move from Azure to AWS or to GCP, we're going to be able to do that really, really well. And we're going to have all of the processes and procedures and native internal talent to be able to execute on those moves. And that's also the type of technology we're putting in place And it aids us not only in our migration efforts, but it's also going to bolster a lot of the business continuity and disaster recovery capabilities that we'll have. Because if you can move things really easy, you can also stand things up really easily in case one thing goes bump. If you have a particular cloud region that goes down, we need to be able to and are designing to be able to bring things up in a geo-redundant cloud-native fashion. So being able to have the tools and technologies and resources to do that super important as well. So it's important to have this cloud-agnostic approach. It's also, really important to have the skills to be able to leverage the different clouds as the business needs might dictate.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how you repurpose your data centers. That's always a fun test too.
Yeah, well, as part of this IT modernization effort, actually, one of our goals and objectives is to shut one down,
Yeah,
because there would have been an enormous cost to upgrade it and maintain it. So that's been a central pillar of our cloud journey. But we do have one that we do intend to keep for quite some time. So
yeah,
every organization is going to be in a different place, and for us, it was important to be able to decommission one.
yeah. That
Others
makes
might want to do more than that.
makes sense. So, we've talked a lot about the technology side of things. What do you see as kind of the real world benefit of Epic in the public cloud to patients and to the hospital staff? I imagine job one is that they don't notice a difference, right? That's job one. You want to, yeah, but how else do you see kind of the staff at Michigan Medicine and the patients there benefiting from this move to the cloud?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this difference between on-prem and the private cloud architecture compared to the public cloud architecture, and I really look at this, in a very similar vein. In that, in our private cloud environment, our on-prem environment, what will you end up doing with your most important application like Epic? Is you tend to buy a whole bunch of infrastructure in year one, day one, in order to support that really critically important application. And then generally about 3 or 4 years down the road, Epic comes up with a number of upgrades, and you have to add more storage and you have to add more compute. And then at about 5 years, you need to do this kind of major refresh. And what ends up happening is you end up cobbling infrastructure together in such a way that your servers are not the same. They have different chipsets. The storage is not the same. They have different I/O capacity. And it leads to a less performant application over time. And you see that in an on-prem infrastructure, and you also see that in the Epic hosting and the private cloud players that are in this space. They buy a lot of traditional infrastructure, and then it gets cobbled together over the years, and then major refreshes happen. So you have these peaks and valleys of their performance. And that it's super dramatic when you actually move from an on-prem environment out to the cloud, because you see this 35% or this 30% performance improvement in how Epic performs to the end user community. So it's a dramatic shift. And what we want to do when we move to the public cloud is we want to maintain that performant application. And because you're in the public cloud, you can actually do that much more effectively. So I can actually deliver Epic on the latest and greatest chipsets, on the greatest server technology that's out there. And after a year, I can refresh that seamlessly without the end users knowing anything about that. And the economies play out. So I don't have to pay anymore to get that additional benefit. So the end users that are actually using the application will actually have a better performing application. So that is wonderful to the end user community that uses Epic. And then I talked a little bit about the different tools and technologies that are available in the public cloud. So I can now start to collect data and harmonize data in a way that's much easier to do, so that I can provide that back to the organization in a much more seamless way. I can't do that on-prem today. I simply don't have the technology in place. And I could do it if I had a mountain of cash,
Mhm.
But with the public cloud, I have the ability to plug into these things and be able to use them as the organization grows into it. So I can turn on data lakes, I can turn on data fabric, I can put something in place like Databricks in order to collect data and provide that back to the organization in a much more meaningful way. So this translates to a better performant application of the end user community. The patients are actually going to be treated better because I'm providing data back that might more be meaningful for their care. So if you wrap all of that together, it's better for the end user community, it's better for the patients. Patients will have a better experience, and ultimately you'll deliver a better result.
Yeah. Well, and if your hospital staff is less distracted spending time logging in, I remember someone told me 3 minute login time or something. That's ridiculous. It's been a little while, so hopefully it's not that case anymore. But so if they're busy doing that, not if they're not busy doing that, they can focus on the patient, which is powerful too.
We have a project in place leveraging Azure Virtual Desktop that'll actually cut our login time in half. So
Wow.
we're super excited about that. And because we can personalize that desktop environment, we can actually reduce the number of logins that actually transpire throughout the day. So not only have we eliminated the initial or reduced the initial logon by 50%, we're also driving further elimination of login times throughout the day, which will yield a significant end user satisfaction increase because of those advantages that we're delivering back to
Yeah.
organizations. So there's lots of different tools and technologies that just yield a better experience.
Yep. Absolutely. Cool. Well, we always like to wrap up these episodes with a little career discussion, career advice, if you will. What would you say is maybe the best piece of advice that you've gotten in your career?
Um, So I've learned over the course of my career that there's always different ways to do things, and in an IT environment, I think there's 1,000 different ways to skin a cat or to address a particular IT problem. And at my point in my career, the best thing that I can do is try to show the vision of what we're trying to do, show the direction of why we're moving in this particular direction, and really foster an environment that makes it feel very safe for the staff to be able to come up with really great ideas in terms of meeting those goals and objectives. And it's been delightful to be at Michigan Medicine. We have really talented staff that are coming up with new and creative ways to connect to the cloud, to segment to the cloud, to provide greater security in the cloud. And we're just super enthusiastic about the direction that we're heading. So if I had to boil it down, to a particular piece of career advice, it's just be flexible and remember that there's lots of different ways to achieve the end result you're looking for.
Yeah. What's the Steve Jobs quote? Something to the effect of, it's foolish to hire smart people and then tell them what they should do rather than let them be smart and use their
I love that
intelligence.
quote. We don't hire people to tell smart people what to do. We hire people to have them tell us what to do. Something to that effect. But I love that quote. Yeah,
That's
that's great.
awesome. Tim, this was a lot of fun, very interesting. I think it's a project that many in the healthcare world are working on, moving Epic to the cloud and trying to evaluate which approaches are best. So I appreciate you taking time to talk with us and share your experiences and insights. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on their favorite podcasting application. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate the time today.